What's up, everybody? So in this video, I want to talk about my story as a self-taught software developer. I wanted to make this video because I wanted to share how I went from a completely non-technical background to teaching myself programming and then searching for jobs. And I think it was like 6 to 8 months. So I had kind of a quick turnaround on that. I'm not sure if that's typical, but with a lot of dedication, you can accomplish a lot of things. So I kind of just want to like inspire you guys and kind of would just want the message I want to get across essentially is that anyone can be a programmer. I'm a firm believer in that. So if there's one thing you take away from this video is if you're thinking about becoming a software developer, you just got to keep your head down, you got to do the work, and I'm sure you'll eventually get there. So now, story time. So when I was growing up, I've always had a passing interest in programming. I think the reason why is because I've always liked building things. I thought growing up I would become an engineer or something of some sort that would build things. When I was younger, I'd always build like Legos or I'd buy pieces of wood and I'd like carve things from it. Like I just liked creating things. It was just something I've always enjoyed doing. So because of that, I think that's probably why I always had an interest in programming, but I've always had a misconception. I thought in order to be a programmer, you had to be some sort of genius or something. Like you had to go to like MIT and study some really complex, CS degree program. And like I just had like this weird misconception that you actually had to be like super smart in order to be a programmer, which looking back now it's not completely true at all. You don't have to be some genius. Programming is something that you can systematically break down and study, piece by piece. It's a learnable skill essentially. There's millions of programmers in the world, so that was just a misconception I had. So also growing up, I had self-confidence issues, so I never really believed that I could do it. So compounded with the misconception, the lack of self-confidence, I never really pursued it, and it remained that way. I never took on programming projects or anything when I was a kid or a teenager. And I actually didn't start programming until I want to say like 2021. And this is just like a passing interest, like, just looking at website code, kind of messing around with it, but nothing too crazy. So I went to school, did my 2 years at a community college, transferred to a university, still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I always thought I would just get like a business degree because I wanted to be an entrepreneur at some point. So I was like, okay, maybe business. Couldn't get into the business school. So then for a second, I'm like, okay, well, if I can't get into the business school, let's look at computer science. Let's maybe pick up programming and see if I can actually make this a career. And when I looked at the requirements for a CS degree at my school that I went to, it had lots of math classes, which most CS programs have math classes. It's not all just programming. And one of the things was math is my worst subject. And so when I went to the counselor's office or the advisor, sorry, she told me that I needed a lot of math classes. Like essentially I needed prereqs for my prereqs to get my prereqs done. And so if I would have went the route of getting a CS degree, I probably would have been in school for a total of like 6 years. And looking back now, that just would have been silly. It just wouldn't have been worth the time and money put into it. So I was like, okay, well, taking the formal route to get a CS education is completely off the table because it would just take way too long. So I quickly gave up on that idea and I thought, okay, well, I guess it wasn't meant to be. I'm not going to be a developer, so I'll just figure something else out. So I ended up settling on a degree, a liberal arts degree, and it was really weird. It's called P&E. So that stands for Politics, Philosophy, and Economics. Kind of a weird degree. It's like a fusion of like three different concepts. I've always been kind of interested in economics, so I was like, okay, and then philosophy, it's actually pretty interesting stuff. So I was like, okay, this is probably like the best of the worst because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I just chose some liberal arts degree that didn't have any prereqs and it was just easy to get into and it just kind of looked somewhat impressive. So I did that for 2 years and actually, no, not even 2 years. I actually clept out of a lot of classes. So if you don't know what clep is, it's essentially just like you take a test and you get credits for a class. So you can essentially skip classes and I save thousands of dollars this way. So if you're in school and want to get rid of some electives, check that out. I highly recommend it. You'll save yourself so much money and the tests were easy. I studied for like 2 weeks and I went and took them at a local community college and I got my credits. So if you can grind away, you can definitely save a lot of money with classes. So um, just an aside, you should look into that. But where was I? So yeah, I did my degree. I got out in about a year. Yeah, I think it was about a year. And so I got out and then reality hit me. I had my degree, but I wasn't really sure what to do with it. So that kind of put me in a position. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go look for a job, but what job do I actually want to look for? I didn't even really know, even at that point. Like I was 21 years old, graduated a year early, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I was like, okay, well, I'm graduated, I don't have a job, and I have a lot of free time. Maybe I can use this to teach myself a marketable skill, quickly ramp up in something and then make myself job ready and go that route. So I was like, okay, well, now that I have time, maybe I can actually pursue this programming thing. So I started looking at books and watching videos, just like the normal stuff people do when they have interest in something. And I started slowly, getting into it. It was like, okay, programming isn't as scary as I thought it'd be. So just kind of kept looking into it, dove a bit deeper, and I got this idea in my head. I was like, okay, maybe I'll become a web developer and I'll start making websites. And I'll build websites and make that like as a side income and potentially make this like my full-time job, because I've read articles of like freelance web developers, they'd make like six figures. I'm like, I want that to be me. I want to make websites. How hard can it be? It's just copy and pasting stuff. And when I actually started looking into web development and like watching videos, I think doing Team Treehouse, I realized that I didn't like developing websites. I don't know what it is. I think it's maybe just like the combination of like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. It was just a bit overwhelming. And I find working with CSS and HTML to be very tedious. I don't know if you guys feel that way. It's fine if you don't, but for me personally, I just found it to be very tedious and I just didn't like it. So I was like, okay, well, maybe designing websites isn't my passion, but I still kind of wanted to be a programmer. So I'm like, what other options do I have? So in the world of technology, there's a lot of different niches that you can specialize in. So I was like, okay, well, if I'm not going to be doing like front end web development stuff, what if I did mobile apps? I've had an iPhone for a number of years. So I was like, let me see if I can build an application for a phone. And so kind of did the same thing, went to Team Treehouse, started buying books at like discount stores on Objective-C programming and Swift, and then just kind of worked my way from there. And yeah, it was the best feeling ever. When I first built my first like practice app or something from a tutorial, it just was amazing that I can get like this software running on my phone. You can build so many complex things, like so many complex applications with code that fits on your phone. To me, I found that to be amazing. For me, that just fascinates me a lot more than website development because mobile apps are the future. I mean, more commerce and people are more engaged in their phones nowadays. So that's really the future. Like apps are where it's at essentially. So I kind of wanted to be on the cutting edge. So I was like, let me pursue mobile apps. I enjoy the technology. I like iOS. I like Swift and Objective-C. So I think I want this to be my specialty. So I just dove right in. I spent every single day studying. And one of the things that I'm glad I did was I didn't just focus on programming. I think this is a mistake that a lot of new developers make. They just focus solely on coding, but that's not all that coding is about. It's also about the fundamentals. And so I also got myself a lot of CS books, studying like theory, data structures, algorithmic thinking, stuff like that, Big O. I taught myself all that. Like I had no life. I just studied day and night pretty much. And that was my life for a number of months. Oh, and actually, I forgot to mention this too. So I was studying or self studying myself, and I figured, why not do a coding boot camp? And I actually went and did a coding boot camp for the first week. And I'm actually kind of mad at myself because I had to put $1,000 non refundable deposit. And when I left after a week, they didn't give it back to me. So I'm kind of mad that I'm out $1,000 for a week that I didn't even really learn anything. But at the same time, I kind of considered a bullet dodged because the coding bootcamp would have cost like 15,000. So I'm like, okay, well, at least I saved a lot more money in the long run. You know, it just wasn't for me. I'm not a fan of coding boot camps, and I'll probably touch on this in another video. Like, I really don't like them. Um, I feel like the age of coding boot camps is kind of over. They just kind of lost their luster, and it's just a really expensive way to learn programming when you can learn everything yourself for free, essentially on your free time. So yeah, that's just an aside. Like, I did do a coding boot camp for like less than a week, and I just lost money, and it just kind of emboldened me to learn more on my own. And I was also living on my own at the time too, so not only was I out of money, but I was not even living at home, so I was just like living off my income I made as a waiter. So yeah, it's just like, for me in my mind, it's like the way. So for me in my mind, what I thought is, it's like I either become a programmer or die. Those are my only two choices. That's kind of how I thought about it. Um, it's either I have to make this work. Like, there's no, this isn't going to work, or I'm going to settle for another job. Like, I'm going to be a programmer. Like, that was my only thought process. Like, that's how dedicated I was to becoming a programmer, because I was literally losing money every month. So I was like, okay, I only have like a specific amount of time before I have to actually get a real job. And I wanted to be a programmer, not whatever other jobs are out there. Like, I didn't even know what kind of job I would have looked for. So that was a huge problem. But yeah, so I taught myself and just kind of kept building apps on the side. Eventually, I ended up building 4 personal apps, which I'll probably touch on in another video too. 4 personal iOS apps. And yeah, with that as my small portfolio, a decent knowledge of data structures and algorithms, and got cracking the coding interview. I was kind of getting acquainted with the interview process, and I was just like learning all these new things. So after like around 6 months or so of teaching myself, 6 to 8 months, I'd say actually, that's kind of when I started polishing my resume and sending them out, and then getting calls from recruiters. And yeah, the rest is history. I'll probably talk about my jobs more in depth in a future video as well. I know I'm just like talking about all like the future content I'm gonna make, but bear with me. So, I mean, I definitely have some crazy stories, by the way, especially the first job. My first job was at a startup, by the way, and oh boy, there's a story behind that one. So yeah, pretty much that's it. I went from being this small kid who just liked building things and had a passing interest in programming, to being an adult who didn't know what he wanted to do with his life, and kind of just made programming work for him. And here I am. Currently I'm working at Amazon, and so to go from having literally no programming knowledge to less than 2 years ending up at a Fortune 500 company like Amazon, I mean, I'm quite proud of myself. I know it seems like I'm bragging, but I'm quite proud of what I've been able to accomplish just through my sheer dedication. So like I said earlier, I firmly believe that anyone can do this. I know it might seem hard, but if you just dedicate yourself to programming, you can make this work like I have. So yeah, that's the story pretty much. So hopefully you learned something. Hopefully I inspired you. Whatever it is, hopefully you just got something from this video. I guess I should say before I go, if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, you should totally do that. This is a growing channel, so I'll have more content just like this. That's going to do it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.